Vladimir Putin tried to claim that 2026 would be the year that Ukraine collapses and Russia overruns the country. The bluff he used to gain leverage in peace talks has unraveled, as Ukraine proves time and time again that Russia isn't the force that Putin claims it to be. It's not Ukraine's defenses that are collapsing, it's Russia's front line. That front line is breaking all across Ukraine as Russian offensives are being shut down left, right, and center. And the perfect example of what's happening to Russia right now comes from the cities of Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. Both cities in the Donetsk Oblast of Ukraine, which is part of the wider Donbass region that Putin wants to claim. Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad have faced assaults from Russia for months, or in Pokrovsk's case, almost 2 years. It's easy to see why, as Russia views both cities as key to the taking of Donetsk. For much of the war, Pokrovsk has been Ukraine's logistical hub in the Donbass, a small city with a pre-war population of 60,000. Pokrovsk provides Russia with the platform it needs to launch attacks further north in Donetsk, and against two more cities in the region's fortress belt, Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. As for Myrnohrad, though less important, it is something of a satellite city to Pokrovsk. If Pokrovsk falls, Myrnohrad is likely to fall alongside it, giving Russia two platforms for its future campaign to the north. At least that's Putin's plan. We'll reveal why that plan is unraveling in a short while. But to give you an example of the effect of the issues that Russia's military now faces, particularly in terms of its frontline assaults, it's on these two cities that Euromaidan Press reported on January 19th. After weeks of attempting and failing to launch large-scale attacks against Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, Russia has switched to dispersed infantry tactics in an attempt to seize key positions in and around the cities. It hasn't worked. What Russia has earned for its tactical turnaround is an enormous number of casualties as Ukraine's Donetsk defenders constantly repel Russian assaults. Russia's casualty count is rising. Its assaults are falling apart. The evidence of that comes from Ukraine's 7th Air Assault Corps, which posted the outcome of Russia's latest wave of failed assaults in the Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad directions. On January 19th, the 7th Assault Corps said, "In total, last week the Ukrainian military eliminated and wounded 370 occupiers. Our military also destroyed and damaged 86 units of motor and motorcycle transport, 20 guns and self-propelled guns, destroyed and landed almost 1,400 attack UAVs." These are enormous losses for a single week of fighting, amounting to Russia suffering casualties of over 52 soldiers per day. Ukraine isn't just killing Russian soldiers mindlessly, though even that would aid the country's defense. The 7th Air Assault Corps notes that Russia is amassing more soldiers in the Pokrovsk direction, meaning everything that Ukraine is doing to repel the current attacks throws a massive wrench into the logistical workings of the Russian war machine. Due to our counteractions, the enemy is unable to sufficiently accumulate forces in the industrial zone area in the northwest of the city. Thus, the enemy is unable to conduct open direct assaults on Rashina, which is currently one of the priority targets in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, the Corps reported. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed that shutdowns like this are becoming increasingly common across the entire front line, as you'll learn in a moment. For now, Ukraine's Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad defenders are actively working to destroy Russia's buildup of troops and equipment in their regions, ensuring that future assaults are easier to repel in the process. What we see happening in the Donetsk region is a microcosm of what's happening across the entire front lines. This is what Ukraine is seeing now. Also on January 19th, the Kyiv Post carried comments made by Zelensky as he explained that Ukraine's troops are destroying Russian assaults all over Ukraine. Fighting from fortifications and backed by an ever-growing swarm of drones, artillery and mortar fire, those defenders are holding their ground against Russia's non-stop assaults, inflicting enormous casualties all across the front lines in the process. And all of this is happening as temperatures in Ukraine have dropped below freezing, showcasing the bravery of Ukraine's forces against a Russian force that is supposed to outnumber, outgun, and overwhelm at every opportunity. I want to commend our soldiers. Despite everything, despite the harsh weather and constant Russian assaults, we have good results in defending our positions. It's important that in many areas our soldiers are doing exactly what is needed for Ukraine, Zelensky declared. And not only is Ukraine defending, it's actively gaining ground against the Russian occupiers. Zelensky went on to name the Pokrovsk, Kharkiv, and Kupyansk sectors as ones in which Ukraine had achieved notable results against Russia's assaults. Keep the Kupyansk sector in mind, as it's a brilliant example of the Russian collapse that we'll cover later in the video. On the offensive front, Zelensky says that a trio of Ukrainian units, the 1st and 225th Separate Assault Regiments and the 5th Assault Brigade, have conducted counterattacks against Russia's assaulting forces that led to Ukraine regaining ground. And no matter where you look across the 1,200-kilometer or 746-mile Ukraine war front line, the story is repeating. In the southern Orikhiv sector, Russia's assaults are being repelled. Head north to Sumy and the same is happening. Ocheretayna is also under attack and being defended brilliantly as Russia's front line crumbles to Ukraine's immense defense. In any other circumstances, the sheer scale of the Russian assault would be terrifying. The number of sectors being attacked at once is more than enough to show that Putin's claims to be more interested in the Donbass than anywhere else are absolute nonsense. He wants all of Ukraine, but Ukraine is making him churn through far more troops than he can afford to lose as he tries to take the country. Zelensky hasn't pulled these claims of Ukraine's stalwart defense out of thin air. Ukraine has receipts aplenty that demonstrate how it's stopping Russia's assaults in their tracks. The situations in Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad that we've already mentioned are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Putin's pathetic strategy of throwing soldiers at Ukraine in the hope they'll magically break through. For instance, Ukraine's Army Inform outlet said on January 16th that Russia's assaults in the direction of northern Kharkiv had once again turned into a meat grinder. The previous week had seen the soldiers of the Katyia Brigade destroy about 70 Russian infantrymen, as Putin's soldiers tried and failed to probe for weak spots in Ukraine's defenses. All the Kharkiv assaulters exposed was the weakness of their own attacking strength. We struck them with 155mm cluster munitions, with drops from heavy bomber drones of the Vampire type, and with the FPV kamikaze drones, said the Katyia Brigade's Chief of Staff, Andriy Pomerhybus, just as the Kyiv Post says has been happening. Coming back to that resource, the Kyiv Post highlights several other instances. In Pokrovsk, drones operated by Ukraine's 414th Unmanned Systems Forces Birds of Magyar Brigade intercepted a Russian attack on January 16th. All Russian troops taking part in that attack were either killed or heavily injured. A video shared by the Birds shows direct footage from Ukraine's drones as they record demolished and burning vehicles, and an attempt made by at least 10 of Russia's soldiers to flee their own attack. That's not how assaults are supposed to work. The defenders should be the ones who run away. Let's take a moment to talk about Ukraine's drones. We mentioned earlier that they have become a key part of the country's defenses, along with mortar and artillery. But how key is revealed by the Kyiv Post. It says that January 18 saw Ukraine unleash drones across all the front lines, and they were responsible for about 1 of every 3 damaged or destroyed Russian combat vehicle and soldier casualty on Sunday. In just 24 hours, Ukraine's drones took out 47 military vehicles or motorcycles and 47 of Russia's drone launch sites. Plus, they killed 187 of Russia's soldiers, with 214 Russian troops also being seriously injured by the drones. Losses are confirmed on video captured by Ukraine's drones, just as we saw from the footage shared by the Magyar Birds, the Kyiv Post says. Is it any wonder why Ukraine is now building an estimated 4 million drones per year? Russia has no answers for them. And Putin's forces also had no answer for what must stand as the highlight of Ukraine's destruction of the Russian front lines. We mentioned earlier to keep the city of Kupyansk in mind. Russia has claimed that it captured Kupyansk several times toward the end of 2025. That isn't true. What's really happening in Kupyansk is that according to recent reporting, Ukraine is reclaiming massive amounts of the city, and it's nearing the point where it's Ukraine that will soon hold all of Kupyansk, not Russia. On January 15th, the report in the Financial Times revealed all. It said that Ukraine's forces were claiming to have almost pushed Russia's troops out of the northeastern city in what the outlet called a dramatic reversal in a town that seemed on the brink of being overrun a few months ago. Ukraine made sure that Kupyansk wouldn't fall. It deployed some of its most battle-hardened units, including the Lazar Group, which is filled with top-level drone operators, to batter the Russian defenses in Kupyansk. Backed by assault groups that contain armored vehicles and mobilized soldiers, elite drone units like the Lazar Group can inflict immense casualties on Russian forces that clear the way for Ukrainian infantry to advance and recapture territory. Ukraine is also getting smarter about how it uses its own terrain. Geography partly explains why determined Ukrainian troops could push back in Kupyansk. The former railway hub is surrounded by forests and split in two by the Oskil River, a natural obstacle that made it harder for Russian units trying to establish a foothold. The Financial Times reports, suggesting that Ukraine has managed to force Russia's forces to attack through narrow channels that can be easily defended, enabling the Ukrainian advance that seems to be on the verge of liberating Kupyansk. And it's only getting worse for Russia in Kupyansk. According to the Kyiv Post, Ukraine's 77th Assault Brigade posted a video on January 19th, showing yet more destruction among the Russian ranks. Ukrainian drones homed in on everything from makeshift bunkers created by Russia in Kupyansk to individual soldiers attempting to flee the fortifications they had created. Even Russia's own observation drones weren't safe from the blitz. Ukraine's drones started ramming them, leaving Russia without the eyes in the sky that could inform them of the movements of Ukraine's troops. A lot of these engagements took place during the night, meaning that Ukraine is also using the darkness, along with Kupyansk's geography, in its ongoing liberation of the city. That's not bad for the defenders of a city that Putin claimed had been overrun. Of course, none of this means that Russia's assaults are going to stop. Its frontline forces may be collapsing in multiple regions of Ukraine, but Putin isn't the sort of person to order a withdrawal or even a regrouping of his troops. He tells them to plow forward no matter what is happening, and they die on his command. For the perfect example of what we mean, we need only look at RBC Ukraine's January 18th report on Russia's assaults over the 24 hours up to 4 p.m. on that day. By that point, 69 combat engagements had either taken place or were in progress across the entire front. 29 of these assaults occurred in the direction of Pokrovsk, with Ukraine managing to shut down all but one of them. The majority of Russia's other attempted assaults either failed or were ongoing at the time of the roundup's publication. Russia's losses for the tracked period between January 17th and 18th amounted to 830 soldiers, 845 drones, 105 vehicles, and 33 artillery systems. Try as hard as they might, Russia's occupiers just can't seem to break Ukraine's defenses. What we're seeing here isn't a series of one-off Ukrainian successes across the front lines. Kupyansk may be the highlight, but Ukraine is holding off Russian assaults all over and regaining ground whenever the opportunity arises. That isn't a coincidence, it's a pattern. And these are the reasons why Russia's front line is collapsing in on itself. It all starts with Russia's massive troop and equipment losses. You've seen some hints already that Russia is losing an enormous number of its soldiers in the assaults against Ukraine, and there is a tactical tweak that Ukraine has made that explains why, which we'll discuss in a moment. As of January 19th, Ukraine reports approximately 1,227,440 casualties among Russia's armed forces, along with the loss of more than 11,500 tanks, over 23,900 armored fighting vehicles, and over 36,000 artillery systems. These aren't inconsequential losses because they have an impact on everything that Russia is trying to do on the front. Basic logic shows us that. Each soldier who dies is somebody with experience who is taken out of the equation. Russia replaces those dead and injured soldiers with new contract troops that are easier for Ukraine to destroy because of their lack of experience. On the equipment front, so many tanks and vehicles being destroyed, often by Ukraine's drones, means that Russian forces often conduct their assaults without any sort of armor. In some cases, such as what we saw in the Liman direction toward the end of November, it's not just tanks and armored vehicles that Russia's troops don't have for protection. They're being deprived of even the most basic forms of protection, such as helmets and bulletproof vests. Russia's armor hasn't exactly excelled in the Ukraine war. But it doesn't take a genius to figure out that some armor is better than none at all. At least with some armor, there's a chance that Russian assaults would succeed. Ukraine has played a huge role in forcing changes in Russia's approach, which contributes to another reason why Russia's frontline forces are struggling so much now. In a December 30th piece, the Moscow Times reported on how Russia's war effort had changed throughout 2025, noting that Russia's biggest change in the year was replacing its mass assaults with small unit warfare. You've just heard about the scale of Russia's tank and armored vehicle losses. This wasn't a choice that the Kremlin wanted to make, but it was forced into making it because of how effective Ukraine's defenses had been. These small units were created to probe Ukraine's defenses, with the idea being to find small weak points through which handfuls of soldiers could infiltrate. It even worked to an extent. In both Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, these infiltration techniques allowed Russia to establish some positions within Ukrainian cities. But there was a problem. These small units often infiltrated without any sort of real support. All too often, the infiltrators were identified by Ukraine, encircled, and destroyed. One of the many examples comes from December 10th, which is when UKR Inform reported on an attempted infiltration into the Ukrainian rear that resulted in the destruction of 5 of Putin's soldiers. This is something that is happening all over Ukraine. Now remember that Russia is carrying out somewhere in the region of 60 to 70 assaults per day. It's not hard to see how it's losing so many of its soldiers when its best tactic seems to be to send in small groups and hope they remain hidden long enough for the ever-diminishing stockpiles of Russian armor to arrive and provide backup. Russia does still try to launch slightly larger assaults, and the fact that it does brings us to another one of the reasons why Russia's frontline forces are collapsing. As Forbes writer Vikram Mittal noted on January 16th, Ukraine's frontline tactics often allow it to attrit Russia's forces before they ever get to a point where they can launch attacks on the territory they're supposed to capture. In recent months, Russia has surged its troop numbers in an effort to break through Ukraine's staunch defenses, Mittal writes, before adding, "These defenses consist of layered obstacle belts that include anti-tank ditches, concertina wire, concrete barriers and minefields, all of which are difficult for Russian forces to breach. Throw the enormous kill zones that Ukraine has created with its thousands upon thousands of drones, and you get a veritable murderer's row of defenses, all of which are being anchored by squad-sized units in fortified positions. Russia sends groups numbering between 50 and 60 soldiers to assault these defended positions, which is when Ukraine's frontline tactics become very clever. Ukraine's soldiers don't stand and fight, they withdraw, tricking the attacking Russians into thinking Ukraine has ceded the position. Now, do you remember the combination of drones, mortars, and artillery that the Kyiv Post mentioned? This is where they come into play. These weapons are trained on the position that Ukraine held, just waiting for Russia's invaders to attempt to occupy. Once Ukraine's soldiers on the ground withdraw and Russia occupies the position, all hell breaks loose. Drones descend, artillery and mortars obliterate. Russia's soldiers see their jubilation turn to outright horror as they're decimated by Ukraine's simple yet effective strategy. And once the dust has settled, Ukraine moves back in to retake the ground, where it sets the trap again for the next group of Russian soldiers who are ordered to launch an assault. And on the few occasions when Russia's attackers realize what's happening as they attempt to withdraw, Ukraine still has the answers. Russia will order a second wave to follow the first, often consisting of drones. However, Ukraine has so many of its own drones in the areas where Russia is attempting assaults that it sees these second waves coming. Ukraine will then counterattack to push the second wave back, ensuring Russia isn't able to secure positions or make the best possible use of its own drones. Over and over, Russia's forces fall for this tactic. What ends up happening is a combination of operations being disrupted and soldier morale falling off a cliff. Future operations that depend on positions being captured don't go ahead because of Ukraine's bait-and-switch approach. Russia's soldiers, knowing that Ukraine has just shredded through their comrades, enter follow-up assaults knowing that they're likely to die or be seriously injured. With many of Russia's soldiers on the front lines being new recruits by necessity due to Russia's massive losses, the assaults against Ukraine weaken because they're filled with terrified soldiers who want nothing more than to go home. Many don't get that chance. They die for Putin's war, as the attritional tactics that were meant to break Ukraine have become Russia's worst enemy. And as more holes are poked in the Russian front line, Ukraine is preparing to change its approach in 2026. Defense will remain strong, as it always has. But now, after a 2025 that has crippled Russia's front line, Ukraine sees opportunity to retake more territory, and it's going on the offensive. Find out more about what Ukraine plans to do in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of what's really happening on the front lines of the Ukraine war. And thank you as always for watching.